Hi, this is Alex Disenhof. I'm the DP of the Mosquito Coast, and this is the Go Creative Show.
Hello and welcome to the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers. My name is Ben Consoli, and today we speak with Alex Disenhof, Director of Photography for the Mosquito Coast on Apple TV+. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
There is so much to talk about, and I was just sort of doing a little bit of a rundown with you before we rolled about all the things I wanted to discuss, but we're talking about color treatments, we're talking about camera motion, we're talking about all the stuff that goes into creating the look of a TV series. So there's a lot to discuss, and we will start in just a minute. But before we get there, I want to mention our sponsor, MZ Education for Creatives. You can find all things about MZ at gocreativeshow.com/MZ, MZED. Of course, follow us on your favorite podcast app. Click subscribe and you'll never miss an episode. And Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. All things Go Creative Show at gocreativeshow.com. So, Alex, this is such a great show. The Mosquito Coast on Apple TV+. So much action, so much energy. I love the look of it. What a fun project to be part of. You did episode 1 and 2. So you really are setting the pace for what this will look like. A lot of times DPs come on, they'll shoot a pilot for something, and they sort of don't need to touch it again. Like they did the first episode and somebody else takes it over. You had the benefit of doing the first 2. So viewers are really getting an insight into the vision that you have. And I'd love to talk about kind of how you started to form the look and the feel and the pace of the show and where that inspiration came from.
Before COVID happened, the plan was actually that I would do 6 of the 9 episodes that were planned.
Okay.
And Rupert and I would do a lot of them together. And so I actually did episodes 1, 2, and 4. I brought in a friend of mine, Guillermo Garza, who came in and shot episode 3. And then he was about to kind of go into production, or maybe he was a week into production on episode 5 when COVID hit and the world shut down. And then I, when it was time to kind of come back to shoot the rest, I actually had another commitment. What I'm doing here in New Zealand, actually.
Okay.
And Rupert did too. So we weren't able to continue with the show, but that being said, we had planned a huge arc, a visual arc for the whole thing. So what was nice about it was we were able to really set the tone and the kind of we knew what was coming. Now it did change a little bit when COVID hit. They had to rewrite things. The season became 7 episodes instead of 9 episodes. Just the practicalities of making television with a release timeline. But long story short, that's what happened. So the first 2 episodes, we were always planning on shooting as a block. And that's how we prepared it. And the idea was, I had some references like Paris, Texas, Wim Wenders and Robbie Mueller, photography on that film is incredible. And there was a certain Americana feeling that we wanted to give, Stockton, and the colors and the color treatment of Stockton. And then it was really important for us to establish their house and their home as a place that was, lived in and warm and a place that you felt like it would be hard to leave, especially for the kids, when you wanted to subconsciously feel the loss of their home. And so in order to do that, we wanted to make the home feel like a good place to be, even if it was a bit ramshackle and kind of rough around the edges. We pumped in a lot of warm light through the windows. We always tried to shoot with sun and really recreated sunlight. We warmed everything up. We spent a lot of time picking the paint colors and the rooms and really to create this place for the family that you felt they really lived, and then that it was a real loss when they had to go.
And I think that's so important because, especially in the first episode, you have to start to understand these people, to like these people, and to kind of feel for them when their life changes. And I think you're doing a great job at this. I want to dive just a little bit more into this goal of yours to make that house feel warm, to make that house feel comfortable, and to give the audience a sense of loss when they need to leave it. So you mentioned using sunlight and warming things up. What are some of the other things that you did to make that such a warm, comfortable place?
Well, I think, a lot of it was just adding texture, always having layers to the image, putting a lot of atmosphere in the house. If you look at some of the shots, we always, pretty much all the sunlight coming into the house was either timed, we worked our schedule around it, or we manufactured it with big lights out the windows. And we wanted to let it feel like a natural place, though. We'd let the big light come in through the windows, and we wouldn't do much else inside. We wanted to really see all of each space and let the characters reside in them. So it was really a combination of production design, costume design, and then, camera, the lighting, and then camera movement, which is something the show, it's a really important part of the show. We discover the house, we discover every environment we discover really is with a sense of propulsive camera movement.
Yes.
Because Rupert really wanted it to be, okay, this character, these characters are on the run. We want the camera to be right over their shoulder, almost in a proverbial sense. It's discovering these places. So even in the house, we see Ali's workshop. You've seen it once during the day, but now he's there at night, and you're traveling, camera's traveling around the whole workshop. We see Margot at the door at one point, then we reveal Ali again. And, in just one shot, you get to see a little bit of a snippet into his mind and all his little trinkets and his projects. And again, just it's letting the audience kind of soak in who these people are without having to tell it to them.
Yep, exactly. And I do want to focus a lot on camera motion, and let's just do it because you brought it up, and why not? Now, no time like the present. So I think the first two episodes really are kind of like almost it's like a masterclass in camera motion, because you're really employing so many different techniques. I mean, there's like dolly, there's gimbal work, there's drones, there's so much happening, and it feels very cohesive and consistent. And that must be a challenge, to be able to have so much camera motion and not make it feel jarring. So talk to me about the decision for these big, large camera moves. What do they mean to the story? And how are you executing them in a way that feels right for the characters?
Yeah. I think it's funny. Camera movement always, I think, was the scariest thing for me coming up and learning.
Why is that?
The craft of cinematography. Well, because I think it's so hard to know sometimes when it will be, when it does feel right and when it doesn't, right? To me, the lighting aspect of visualizing a story was always something that I think came a little more naturally. So I have to credit Rupert a lot in our relationship over the last, half decade, really pushing me into kind of new ways of moving the camera and reasons for moving the camera. And, we have the great advantage of it being a story about a family who ultimately is on the run, and we don't know really why or where they're going. And so we wanted right away to establish this camera as an active participant in this journey that we're allowing the characters to allow us to discover the places as viewers, right? So we start off right away, it's half practical, half CG shot through the ice machine, the very beginning of episode 1. We used a probe lens to push through a real, tunnel into this box they built. And then CG takes over, and then we used a different kind of lens, a T-Rex
What is that? A T-Rex lens?
It's a probe. It's basically a snorkel lens, which it allows you to get the camera into kind of a unique position, and it allows for really close focus. And it's when the ice cube comes out, and the sun and the dad look at the ice cube, and the ice cube and them are in focus. And we shot that at like a T22, so we could see them both in focus, pumped a crazy amount of light into that room, and it allowed for, the ice cube was maybe an inch away from the lens. And so,
look at this. I've got a picture of it right
crazy,
here.
Right?
I'll put a link to it in the show notes. Wow, that's an expensive lens to rent for a day. Wow.
Yeah. But it is. But it's pretty cool because just right there we're setting this kind of the expectation that the camera is going to be active. And And then, and then the next scene we shoot it, it was me in a helicopter flying over the fields north of LA. We tip down into the dirt, and then we pick up with a drone shot, stitch into a drone that goes over this humongous factory farm.
Yep.
That goes all the way into a close up of Allie. And again, within the first 3 minutes or whatever, 5 minutes of the show, you've established that the camera, will move, and it will move a lot, and it's not doing it superfluously. It's really it's allowing you to kind of marinate in these environments,
Yeah, and something that I thought was kind of interesting about the way that you approach the camera motion, and I'm curious to see if you'll even agree with this, is it seems like they don't feel like oneers in that you're just doing a motion shot to like blow through a bunch of pages and get things done quick. It feels like you're almost kind of extending the story a bit, like you're letting the audience experience the location and sort of discover the space, not throwing too much content at them, more or less just being like, this is our environment, and you're getting a feel for the character throughout the motion. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm not really articulating it well, but there's a difference between the idea of a oneer and kind of these big discovery experiential motion shots. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it was about, really. It was never about, combining action pieces or anything like that. It was truly about the atmospheric nature of the show and experiencing these places. And again, we wanted to feel, especially in these first two episodes, the first episode with the house, let the audience understand, who these people are, not through exposition, but through visualization of their world, right? So let's see their world. And that was Rupert's kind of whole thing is, we need to really just kind of sit in it a bit before the real kind of action kicks off. And then when they go out into the world, when Allie, brings his son to the garbage dump or to collect the oil for the truck and things like this, every environment we scouted, everything we found, the train station with him and his daughter, they're kind of exaggerated realities of what the real world is, right? This garbage dump was a place that we actually doesn't exist in America anymore. That was in Mexico, and we played it for America. But the idea that it's this overwhelming amount of discarded commercial detritus, they were all exaggerations of reality, and they were visual exaggerations of reality to show you how Allie views, the modern world and how he's showing his kid. And so we wanted to, again, it was always about showing the audience, not just telling them. And so the more we could open it up with our camera, the better. So,
do you think about scale when you're doing these types of motion shots and you're up in a drone and a helicopter? Are you concerned with how am I representing scale here, and how does that reflect on the characters in the story?
In terms of
okay, so you're revealing the home, let's say, and you're showing it on this big lot of land. There's an isolation factor to that. There's something that's almost vulnerable to it. When you're going through this factory and it's this more like kind of tight quarters, narrow rows, following along this pathway, it's very leading. It's very almost like narrowing of your perspective. Are you thinking about things like that as you're doing these? Or is it simply just like, that's a cool shot, let's do it?
No, I think it's all story driven. It really is. I mean, we spent, this is truly a location based show, right? We didn't build any sets. It was all found locations. Wow. We spent months scouting and finding the right places. And
even the house was a real house. Oh, wow.
Totally. 100% of it was a real house. I mean, there was not one, we painted the insides. We decked out the little outbuilding to make it his workshop, but nothing was built.
That's
in terms
cool.
Of structures. Yeah. And it was important for us to find a place that did feel isolated and vulnerable. This is a family is hiding out. Again, you don't really know why. But you do have to see that they are outside of, the kind of the modern world. And so all those shots where you see the house by itself in the middle of these big fields surrounded by, day farm workers and stuff like that. They're really important to show because again, they tell you the family's situation without having to tell it to you with words.
What is the biggest challenge when working in real environments like that? Not having to choosing to do a real house instead of a house in a built house in a studio.
Sure. Yeah.
What's the biggest challenge?
It's always about control, right? As a cinematographer, you're always looking to control every element if you can, because, these scenes, for instance, if you and I having a dialogue here, if we were to shoot it as part of a movie, you'd shoot your coverage and then you'd shoot my coverage, and it might take 3 or 4 hours, and the light changes if we're sitting outside, and so it's always about, of course, if you're in a studio, you can control every single thing. So it's always this constant battle of control and scheduling to accommodate the light, changing weather, all those things. So that's what it is. But, Rupert and I have done a lot of work together, and we always work in real environments. And a lot of my career has been working in, especially early on in the indie movies, it's always working in real environments. And so you embrace those challenges and you incorporate them into the storytelling oftentimes. And you always find it's much more inspiring, I think, when you're in a real house and you see the real vista, because all of a sudden you come up with interesting shots. We found there's a shot when I think it's episode 1 where the teenage daughter kind of separates from the family a little bit, and you see the mom in the living room of the house looking for her daughter, and she leaves frame, and then all of a sudden we push in and we rack focus. And we see the daughter in the far distance running through the farmlands, and again, you can't come up with a shot like that unless you've found a house like that in the middle of farmlands. So, yeah. It's a give and take. It's like you're giving up a lot of control, and then you're trying to fight for it every minute of every day. But you're also getting this texture and this realness that you just can't. It's just impossible to replicate in the stage.
Let's talk about the camera package that you chose for the Mosquito Coast. What did you test, and what ultimately did you choose? So
I always knew I wanted to stick with the Alexa family. I've used it so much over the years. I love the user kind of the usability of it and the interface. And then I have a great relationship with my colorist, Tom Poole. We've worked together a lot. And we have we knew we were going to develop some custom lookup tables, LUTs, to create the look I wanted for the show. And I just know the color science of the Alexa so well at this point that it just felt like the right choice. So that was always there. I went with the LF Mini, because we wanted to play with a little slightly larger format with these, just for many reasons. We had these big landscapes. We also had small rooms that you could, the mini form would fit well in, and so much camera movement on gimbals, all sorts of stuff. Again, keeping it with the mini just made sense. So really the testing came in with the lenses. I used the DNA LF lenses from Arri.
DNA, let me see. DNA. I'm going to just pull this up so I can take a look at it.
Yeah.
DNA LF lens. Oh, here they are.
Yep. Yeah.
I know that when people choose to use the Alexa Mini LF, you are kind of limiting your lens choices.
You are.
More and more, there's, as time goes on, there's going to be more options, but you are kind of like, that's a pretty dramatic choice. It's not dramatic, but it's a significant choice because you're sort of narrowing your field of lenses that you can choose from.
Yes. Yeah. So we decided, I tested those. Yeah. I basically tested most of the lenses available for the LF, the larger sensor at the time, which was now 2019, fall of 2019. I think that it came down to the signature primes from Arri and the DNAs, which the DNAs just have a little bit more character to them. There's something about the kind of fall off on the edges that fit the kind of rough-hewn quality of our story that I really loved.
So I think that makes sense, choosing the DNA. What was the other lenses that you said, the signature primes?
The signature primes, which are beautiful lenses. I think like Roger Deakins used them on 1917. I want to
Yeah.
say it was those ones. You've seen, everyone's probably seen one of their favorite shows were shot with these lenses. They're beautiful.
Yeah.
They just, for me, they're actually a little bigger, which I knew we were going to be moving the camera so much that I wanted smaller lenses, which the DNAs have a little bit of a lighter profile. And then, again, there was just this quality. The DNAs have this a bit, it's a bit obnoxious, but there's this, this quality to them that it's hard to explain, that has this great fall off to them, and this organic feel to the glass, and they're all a little bit different from each other, which can be a challenge, but these days it's not much of a challenge, in terms of digital grading. It's, you can just correct, any little differences in color contrast and stuff like that.
Let's take a quick moment and talk about MZ, Education for Creatives. Now, MZ is really kind of like the Netflix for filmmaking education. But it's so much more than that, because the quality is just at its highest level. So when you go to MZ, you are faced with hundreds and hundreds of hours of high-quality, video-based filmmaking education covering all sorts of topics like cinematography and directing, post-production, visual storytelling, and more. And it's all there at gocreativeshow.com/MZ. Now, the courses, certainly the topics, the subject matter, that's all extremely important. But even more important are the teachers. I don't know about you, but I can't learn anything unless the teachers are high quality. I'm just not that type of person. I need to really feel like the teacher is giving me information, and they need to be good at their craft, or else I just can't absorb the information. And that is one of the reasons, just one of many, that I love MZ, because we're talking about trainers that are in the field doing it at a high level. Like, okay, the art and technique of film editing is one of the courses on MZ, and it's taught by Tom Cross, who is the editor of La La Land and Whiplash. You know what I mean? It's like we're dealing with people that are working at a high level, working in the industry, and really sharing their knowledge. We've got Vincent Laforet on there, Shane Hurlbut, Philip Bloom, and it goes on and on and on. Now, here's the cool part. You get 20% off your purchase by using coupon code GCS20. So GCS20. Use that in the coupon code area at checkout, and you will get 20% off. And yes, you can buy individual courses, and that's fine. But what I recommend is becoming an MZ Pro member, because then you have access to everything. And who wouldn't want that? There's certainly topics that you're interested in, but what's cool is that the stuff that you might not necessarily think you're interested in, or might not necessarily think you have a talent for, but try it out. You may unlock something new and give yourself a new tool for your arsenal. So it's all there at gocreativeshow.com/MZ, MZED, MZ Education for Creatives. You have quite a significant exterior sequence in the second episode. The first 10 minutes or so of the episode is outside quite a bit and at night. And you've got some beautiful opportunity for just gorgeous bokeh back there with all the street lights and all the colors out there. I want to talk about that sequence, but before we do, I just want to talk to you about your color signs for this and the color palette that you chose, because it's very consistent, and it's given me kind of a tealish, orangish sort of vibe, but it's almost like a modern version of that. I'm curious, in your perspective, how do you describe the color of the Mosquito Coast, and how did you get there?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I mean, again, I looked at a lot of photography from some like Wim Wenders and Robbie Mueller, who did a few great movies together. But Paris, Texas was a specific one for their night work that I loved. There was this green, and these greens in that movie and reds that were just so quintessentially American. I don't know how to best describe it, but it's just this beautiful palette. And then, as you go further south into Mexico, I looked at, Alex Webb's photography and all sorts of different things like that, and found some beautiful colors that I felt like would be good for the show. And so that it kind of evolved from some of that, just pouring through references. And the teal and orange thing, obviously there's like the Michael Bay version of it, which is, kind of blockbuster movie. and I didn't want to go there. I didn't think that was appropriate for our storytelling. Ours is a bit more grimy and rough, and there's a beauty to, I think, sodium streetlights. I knew I wanted to base the show at night. When we were going nights, I wanted to base it in this kind of sodium and metal halide kind of urban vapor, this world where you can mix those two colors, which are naturally sodium vapor lights burn orange on film and in real life. And then they kind of metal halide world and fluorescent world burn more green and teal. And so I knew that those were going to be the contrasting colors at night, because I had no real interest in shooting clean white LEDs that are now coming, into most cities. I wanted it to be a visualization again of Ali's world, of his worldview, which was the world is not a nice place, that the world is filled with empty, consumers and a broken down system. And visually those lights have this kind of grittiness to them because they're not meant for filmmaking. And so they give these kind of pallid tones. So anyway,
and they're also very relatable. Like you see those lights in film, and you just know. I mean, maybe younger people that haven't really experienced that, a teenager or early 20-something, it wouldn't make any sense. But I certainly can relate to that color, and it makes sense. It has a gritty urban city nighttime feel. Look.
Yeah, and I've explored that look several times in the last few years in different projects, and there's something about it that I keep coming back to. That draws me to the because it's still colorful. That's the other thing. It's certainly it's not like you're draining all the color out of your nights, which oftentimes can be the tendency. And I wanted to keep the show colorful. So that's kind of, it was really built around practical lighting, knowing that I was going to rely on these things. And I would oftentimes, that first few minutes of the second episode, it was split between California and Mexico, all to look like California, but it was a really tricky sequence actually to shoot between two countries and not know the seams between them. Yeah. So I would, we carried a bunch of practical, buy them at Home Depot or wherever, practical lights, and put them up on poles along the streets and create our own nighttime environments.
So let's talk about that opening scene in episode 2 and what made it so challenging. You had mentioned that you're shooting it in California and in Mexico, so there's one challenge. But yeah, just kind of walk me through first of all, why? Why did that happen?
It's one of the logistical challenges with filmmaking is time and money always are the main guides to what we do in terms of how we do things. And so it was determined as we were shooting that we just couldn't afford to keep shooting in America. We knew we were going to be going to Mexico anyway for a lot of the material. And so and in a lot of the locations we weren't finding in California, like the garbage dump, for instance, it just doesn't exist. You can't have that much open waste anywhere in America. Yeah. So they made the decision, hey, you know what, let's pull down to Mexico. And we went to Mexicali right on the border and right over the border and found a lot of these amazing locations. The abandoned mall that Ali and Dina go into and see all the homeless people, the homeless encampment. That's massive, broken down, again, palace of consumerism that is broken down. Again, it's just a visualization of Ali's worldview. That was in Mexicali. And then, there's this sequence at the end of episode 1. That's this they're driving around. I won't give it away. It's kind of this exciting piece with dad and daughter. And then so some of that was in California, up above LA. And then some of it were in streets in Mexico, just again, because of the scheduling and all that stuff. And then as they come to this mall, the intersection outside the mall was in one part of Mexicali. The mall was in a different part of Mexicali. And, we built an extra window up above the intersection to shoot through to make it look like he's, when they go in the mall, they look down on this intersection, they see police arriving. There's all these things. And then there's the sewer shot, which we're looking into a sewer and working out of a sewer. That was built in a parking lot somewhere else. I don't even remember what part of the country we were in at that point. And so, the continuity of lighting was obviously a real challenge. And that was why, that I picked locations that we could control, and we put all those street lights you see. Everything was us. That was not
really?
It was not using existing lighting. It was meant to look like we were using existing lighting, but actually it was very controlled. And I also knew we'd be covering a lot of ground. We start with this butterfly on a Coke can. We travel a whole city block, to then reveal the car driving by. So I knew that we were going to be seeing huge swaths of streets at night. And I needed control. I couldn't rely on what the world was going to give us. So.
Yeah. All right. So there's a bunch of things there I want to get into real quick. Okay. So we'll probably work backwards because it's the freshest in my mind. But you had mentioned that we're seeing a lot of street lights in this scene, exterior, outside. You saying those are yours? Are you talking about just changing the bulbs and fixtures, or are you bringing like actual like street lamp fixtures and putting them in the pavement? What do you mean by that?
Both.
Okay.
There were some poles there that we just replaced. They had some modern, again, more modern LED white lights that we just took them out and put our own sodium vapor lights in. There were some in, when you're not going to see the base of the stand, art department can put poles up and then you just put your light, in the grand scheme of things, what the crazy things we do as filmmakers, putting a pole up and a light on it is actually not as hard as it kind of sounds if, you and I were to go do it on the street randomly by ourselves. But when you have an infrastructure, the art department can get those things done pretty quickly.
Yeah, and like you said, you're not seeing the base of it. A lot of it is in really soft focus, so you can get away with that type of stuff.
Totally.
All right, so we've got that. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about is you had said that over time you realized that budget and time and all that stuff sort of brought you to Mexico for some of these things. Did you know from the beginning that you were going to be shooting this sequence in so many different areas?
No,
right.
we actually scouted all of it in the U.S. We spent hours planning for completely different locations, and then reality came and smacked us in the face, and we had to basically redo half of our planning. And so it was something that I brought my gaffer, this amazing guy Paul Samaniego, who was instrumental in setting the look with me in the States, but also I said to production, okay, if we're going to do this, I need to bring him because he knows, everything from, he's sitting there. We knew by the time we knew we were going to switch locations, then it became, okay, we have to measure the distance of the lights to the actors. We need to get exact, stop readings, and we need to know because we're going to be cutting between, a close-up in this country and a close-up in this country, and they're in the same scene. How do we make that work? And so it really was so instrumental to have someone else there who could just focus on the lighting, the technical aspect of matching, and he speaks Spanish as well. And so he could, work with the Mexican crew to make everyone kind of understand what we were going for, get them on the same page. But it was really, it was a big technical undertaking because you have to, as a viewer, if you're you can't, if you see the seams, you're taken out of it. So,
I mean, I didn't see the seams. I would never have thought it was shot in two different countries. There are obviously moments where you clearly they have to stitch this together because you can't do it all in one shot. But never in a million years would I think you were bouncing from country to country. That is crazy. And when you need to do that, what are your biggest concerns?
I think it's just, again, consistency, right? It's like we knew we were going to, as soon as we started to look at locations in Mexico, we said, oh, wow, okay, these are amazing. It's not a problem of not finding interesting places. It was especially when you're on a location scout, you have to imagine so much, right? It's like when we all location scout our wherever we're going, it's the final product is in your head. It's not on the street right there. So you're looking at a street that, you go there at night, whatever, and it's a black hole. There's nothing there. There's not enough light to shoot there, or if there is light, it's not in the right place. And you say, okay, how can I make this, first of all, look the way I want it to look for the story, and block out the way that the actors are going to be moving and all that stuff. And then there was this extra layer to it of saying, okay, now how can I make this location here and this location over here feel like the same location, even though we're going to be shooting it with a completely different crew. We're going to be shooting it months apart. We're going to be in a different country. And so it just took a lot of imagination, and then a lot of kind of it's pretty tedious, actually, just the going over and over where the lights are, how they're, where they are in relation to the actors, the color temperatures of the sources, because, even in, these old sodium lights and these old mercury lights and this metal halide lights, all these things, from unit to unit, they have a different color shift. They're not manufactured to be film lights. So, saying, okay, this is a scene, this is the light we use to key, this very specific light is the one we use to key these characters here. We're going to bring it down to Mexico with us, because that's, that we want to capture that quality, because, the one that we get in Mexico just might not burn the same. There might be an older lamp. It might have different plastic on the front of it. You just never quite knew what you were going to get. So it just was there was a lot of worrying and a lot of just kind of going over and over and over the plan. So, yeah.
I want to switch gears for a minute and talk about your approach to shooting exterior daytime. There's quite a bit of that. You're kind of all over the place. You're in the desert, you're in the city, you're kind of everywhere. What is your approach to that? When you've got scenes like that coming up, how are you setting up your shots, your blocking, your lighting package to, arm you with what you need to get the best stuff?
Yeah. Well, it's evolved, I think, over the years a little bit. I've come from indie movies where you have nothing and you just shoot around the daylight. So I still always try to schedule, and I think probably most cinematographers do, you plan for if you're going to be in full sun all day, wherever you are. So you always shoot towards the, backlight or side light, and you try to work with the director and the AD to kind of work the scenes out in a way that, in the worst case scenario, if you can't cover the sun, if you whatever it may be, and you don't want front flat sunlight, schedule it and plan it around that. And then, and then it's the tools of control come in when you either don't want direct sunlight at all because the scene calls for, overcast or moody or whatever it may be. Or if you have, one of those days where the sun comes out and it goes away. And that's where the, the lights and the big overheads come in as well. If we're up to me, obviously I would never have to pull out a light outside. I just think you've kind of,
does it feel like cheating to you?
Well, it just never feels right. There's something about it. I can always tell when someone's put a light on outside, because it just doesn't have the same quality of the sun. We haven't invented a light that truly mimics sunlight, real, true, harsh California sunlight, or anywhere really. And also just that it takes more time. It's just you do it when you have to. That's how I always look at it. So again, it's really just about the planning of it and then reacting to what the real world gives you. So
you'd rather just diffuse and bounce and just use the sun as your source.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at most of the scenes, and especially the first two episodes of Mosquito Coast, there's hard sunlight everywhere. And we, if you look how they're blocked, almost always it's either back or side lit, unless I wanted it to be front light, which there's one scene in particular with Ali and his son in this parking lot, when the police officer comes up and they're in kind of this front light, but it was a low winter front light. I knew it would look kind of interesting. There's this kind of they're in this harsh urban landscape. And I knew that at some point the way the scene was going to be blocking, someone was going to have to be front lit, and I didn't want to diffuse it because it just felt wrong. You know, it felt like, let's embrace the kind of gritty reality of it all. So I just like, hey, let's put them in the front light. They're kind of being interrogated by this police officer, and it feels appropriate for the scene. So it's not something to be afraid of if it works for the story. But I certainly wouldn't want to shoot everything, blazing front light. And that's why you plan, and that's why you try to work with your AD and your director. Most directors understand. I think, they want the show or the movie to look good too, and they'll work with you to make it happen. So,
yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize until you've done day exteriors and you are chasing the sun, like, you don't necessarily think first about, I mean, people in your position that have been, that do it at that level certainly do. But I think, people that are kind of just starting out in their career or maybe doing commercial work or even corporate work and you're doing outside stuff, you don't necessarily think during the location scout, like, we should be placing our talent in a certain position so that we don't have front-facing light. I mean, that's a lesson that you sort of learn through experience and mistakes, quite frankly.
Yeah. And I think it's another thing to think about foreground, middle ground, background, like as you're developing a shot as well, because it's just as important too that, okay, so maybe your character, you've figured out a way to put them in the shade, but what's 20 feet behind them? If there's a big white wall and it's going to be front lit all day, you might want to think about changing if you don't have the means to cover it, or unless that's the look you want. Again, maybe that's the look you want. But I think a lot of things that I've learned over the years is to really just, the most time I spend kind of scouting actually is day exteriors, because at nighttime you have, even though there's oftentimes more work put into the lighting, you eventually have more control. You just have more control, right? Because it's almost like you're working in a studio in some ways, where you get to put the light where you want to put it. There's not a big ball of fire in the sky moving around as you're trying to shoot, or
at least there shouldn't be.
There shouldn't be. If there is, other issues rather than filmmaking. No, I mean, but really, it's like, it's the day where it requires the most scheduling and planning in many ways, because you're going to be fighting this force that you can't stop as much as you try, and so it's about working with the talent, working with the director, working with the AD to cheat. And oftentimes, I've done things, I don't remember if we did it with Mosquito Coast, but even just recently in the shoot, we were on top of a mountain, and you don't have much control. So, okay, well, you want to shoot in backlight. Well, tell the actors to just basically flip the scene 180 degrees, tweak it a little bit, and your background's a little different, and the light looks great based on where the sun is. And even though if you were to shoot a wide shot of the scene, maybe you would see that they're completely 180 degrees from where they were. You just don't. There's no. You can get away with so much if you're trying to make the light look good on an actor and you're in a close up. The actors will usually play ball as well because they want to look good. So
yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, the show certainly it just looks so cool, and you guys should definitely check it out if you haven't already. The Mosquito Coast, 7 episodes. It's on Apple TV Plus, and it has such a richness to the color palette that. The show that I watched right before it was Your Honor with I always want to just call him Breaking Bad, but talk about polar opposite. I mean, Your Honor is like gray. There's like no color anywhere. There's no joy or happiness anywhere. It's a miserable hour every night. It's such a good show, but like
it is. Yeah.
But it was so kind of fun to come to the Mosquito Coast after Your Honor, because it's like bright and colorful and rich and the deep blacks, and it's just such a cool show visually, and it's certainly well acted, and it's a great show. But it's Go Creative Show. We're talking about visuals here, but certainly worth checking out if you guys haven't seen it already. It's on Apple TV Plus. It's called The Mosquito Coast, and thank you, Alex, for coming on and talking about it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, I want to thank Alex Disenhof for coming on the show and talking to us all about the Mosquito Coast on Apple TV+. I also want to thank Connor Crosby from ignitionvisuals.com for producing this show, and Dave Siegel from siegelsound.com for mixing and mastering and making Go Creative Show sound so good. So thank you guys for helping us out and making the show happen. I also want to encourage you to follow us on your favorite podcast app. Click subscribe and you will never miss an episode, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Lots of new content that we're putting up on YouTube, including video versions of this show. So if you are only hearing my voice and you're saying, I just want to know what the host and the guests look like, good news, you can see it for yourself over at our YouTube channel, because every one of these most recent episodes of the past year or so are video, and they are on our YouTube now. All Things Go Creative Show at gocreativeshow.com. And of course, you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Ben Consoli, where I post all sorts of behind the scenes of my production company and all the things that I'm doing in my world. So you can check it out there. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and we will see you next week on another episode of the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers.